Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome to the start of another reading vlog. This reading vlog I'm so excited about because I'm finally picking up one of my most anticipated fantasy standalones that came out last year that was on so many favorite books of the year lists. It's by one of my favorite authors. I don't know why I haven't read it yet, but I'm finally reading it this week. That's right, friends. I'm finally reading Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong, described as a feminist, cutthroat, magical, academia-esque revenge story. Truly say no more. I will also say this book is being traditionally published this fall, so while the physical copy has been out for a little while now, it might be kind of difficult to get your hands on. I personally might be repurchasing it again because the upcoming release looks stunning. But obviously M.L. Wong also wrote The Sword of Kaigen, which is one of my all-time favorite fantasy books. It's also an incredible standalone, and this is also a standalone, which in general I feel like is pretty rare within the fantasy space. So I'm so excited to read and experience this book with you guys over the course of this week. I really feel like I am going to love it. I'm really hoping it's a 5 out of 5 star read for me. I could use a 5 out of 5 star read. I feel like it's kind of been a minute, so I'm crossing my fingers for this one, but I think it's going to deliver. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start reading. But actually first I'm going to make lunch. Alrighty, lunchtime, low stakes day. We're making some avocado toast. I have some frozen rolls in the oven. I have one large avocado and this Oreo I'm eating. I'm gonna do red onion, lemon. We're keeping it easy. We're keeping it easy, folks. Lunch is served. Well, I should say lunch part one, because we also have some peaches in the fridge that I think we'll each have a peach as well, but I didn't feel like cutting it up. Just want to eat this. We'll circle back. Hello, I am making a pot of afternoon coffee. You know, sometimes it just be like that. I know Clay wants some coffee too, so it's fine. It's not even fully just for me. I also wanted to say happy Pride, everyone. It's officially June. While it's definitely a time for celebration in that regard, I do want to quickly shout out and kind of remind us that it's still really important to stay involved. I was actually reading an article that really reminded me of the importance of staying involved locally in terms of politics. Obviously, I live in Texas, and there was so many anti-LGBTQ plus legislation introduced in the House last year, but pretty much all of them were prevented from moving forward. And why? It's because people voted and got people in there to stop that stuff from happening. So happy Pride. All that to say is it's important to keep track of things, especially locally within your own state legislators if you live in the United States. But let's also continue to work to make things better, more accessible, less discriminatory, because we need to do all those things, you know? Also excited because we got this new local coffee. Well, it's from San Antonio, but it's pretty local and it smells so good, so good. And we also got this big bag of flat track coffee as well. Delicious. Delicious. It's time to have some of this coffee, and then I'm gonna start my book. Matilda and I are gonna vibe, and it's going to be a vibe, and no one's gonna talk about how late this coffee is in the day that I'm consuming it. Matilda is lounging per usual. Off a little bibimbap for dinner. Should be good. So I'm gonna go eat this and watch some Top Chef, and then I will give you all a reading update and get back to reading. I am laundered and I'm reading. Cheers. Good morning. It's a little stormy out there, which I won't lie is perfect reading ambiance because I'm gonna sit down now and read more of my book. I've read 100 pages. I need to do a reading update, but I really want to drink coffee first, so I'm going to circle back, and I'm sorry for the delay. But spoiler alert is I'm liking the book quite a bit. This author is so good, I feel like, at doing really interesting and intense world building quickly. And the story is already like interesting. It's maybe a little on the nose, but I am interested, curious, excited to read more, and those 100 pages were like a breeze to read, which feels good. So we're gonna sit down. Millie and I are. She already stole my seat, I'm sure. Millie, steal my seat. But we're gonna look at this rain and we're gonna do some reading. Hello friends, good morning. Let's do a reading update of Blood Over Bright Haven by M.L. Wong. I have read about 100 pages of this book and I'm happy to report I'm really liking it so far. The first 100 pages has definitely been about setup for the world, the magic system, and the characters, and sort of the beginning of the character dynamics that is definitely going to play out over what I want to say is a fantasy standalone. So far I've been pretty impressed and I'm liking a lot of what I'm reading. I'm loving some of what I'm reading, I'm liking some of what I'm reading, and I'm excited to see how the rest of the story is going to play out over the course of this book. But let's take a step back and talk about what this book is about, because there's actually a lot to cover. So starting first and foremost, this book is set kind of in this utopian industrial city, and all of its industry and technological advancements is fueled entirely by magic. And also surrounding the city, there's basically this dome that sort of makes it very difficult to leave and come into the city. And this sort of protects the populace from these sort of monsters that exist on the outside that will attack anyone on sight. The clarity as to who and what and why that's sort of happening is unclear to us, but just know it's very dangerous out there. So the city has that sort of magical protection. There's lots of different technological advancements over the years, and again, all of it has been fueled by magic, and in particular, magical individuals, especially very powerful ones, are very like politically involved and politically powerful as well. There's both a government and an institution called the High Magistry, where the most powerful magic users, or supposedly, are entered into this and basically help to pursue good works throughout the city, yada yada yada. Obviously, I'm using utopian here with a lot of air quotes because like any society that's usually presented to us in these types of books, it might be utopian for a certain and select group of people, but there's obviously a lot of discrimination or hardship that's pressed upon and passed along to large swaths of the population, which is definitely a big part and center of this story. So this is kind of a two-perspective story. First and foremost, we're following our main character, Skonia, and Skonia is a very, 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 very talented magic user. I'll talk more about the magic system later, but I would sort of describe it as magical coding. So there's definitely like a very academic lean to the magic system in this world, and it's very intricate and super cool to read about. But what's important right now is that Skonia is super good at it. She's basically thrown herself headfirst since the age of 4 as an orphan to become as powerful in magic as she possibly could, with a dream of being entered into the High Magistry. This dream is not just difficult because it's a very competitive path, but also no woman has ever been inducted into the High Magistry until today, because she successfully has. And she thought with being admitted, she's finally broken down all these barriers. Finally, society will be able to progress. More women will be able to pursue magic at higher levels into the government. However, though, she quickly realizes once she arrives, it's very much a boys' club. They have no interest in working with her. They immediately exclude her, and things are just as, or perhaps even more difficult for her on a daily basis, like working with these new colleagues. To make matters worse, they don't even give her a real research assistant because there's like a big problem everyone is trying to solve in the High Magistry, and instead just kind of like assign her this janitor who happened to be nearby, which is also our other main character. And his name is Thamil, and Thamil is a refugee that entered the city sometime in the past in a very desperate attempt to try to survive, and Thamil has now been labeled as a kind of lower group of individuals in the city called a Quen, and these people are basically relegated to certain parts of the city, are treated not as full citizens. There's lots of stereotypes and a lot of inaccurate information spread about them. They're basically relegated to the worst types of jobs within the city, and Skonia and Thamil begin to unexpectedly begin to work with one another. This book so far has really captured my attention. First and foremost, the setting is really good. This sort of industrial magical society is just very interesting to learn about. And I think the world building too has so far been very successful, which I feel like Emma Wong has always been very, very good at. Two, the magic system is so compelling. Again, I've already described it as sort of magical coding. Basically, magic can be pulled from this sort of other realm, and then it has to be harnessed and applied in specific ways. Skonia herself is a very talented mapper, meaning she sort of writes scripts and code to apply magic in specific ways. And she's just very talented, despite what all of her male colleagues would want her to believe and expect from her. And the last part about this book, I would say, are the characters and the character dynamics. Obviously, it's very clear from page one, this is going to be a book about disrupting and overthrowing the status quo. Obviously, Skonia as a woman faces a lot of discrimination and perceptions about her skill and just her ability within society itself. And she's kind of in a situation where she's simply so talented, they cannot ignore her. But it's not just about Skonia, because it's also about Quen. And I think it's really interesting that the author is pairing these two characters together, because just because Skonia has had and faced difficulties and hardship does not mean that she is immune to her own bad perception, how society has shaped her to believe and apply certain stereotypes to other people. They get along, but she also has a lot of false perceptions about who he is, how his people move about the world, about their religion, about their language, these types of things. And it's definitely kind of to show the case of intersectionality. While Skonia definitely faces discrimination, she still has a lot of privilege within this society. And these sort of things are definitely in play, not only in their working relationship, but just in the story at large. Again, I've only read 120 pages, and I really feel like a lot is going to be happening here. But so far, I am really intrigued. Also, the magic system is just so interesting, and the setting is so interesting. Aspects of some of the societal and social commentary, which I like, I think it's a very good thing to include, has felt a little on the nose and maybe like a little straightforward in its delivery. And I feel like there could be a lot more nuance kind of included in some of this dialogue. With that in mind, I don't think Emma Wong is doing a bad job here. Again, I still have a lot of this book to read, but I just wanted to give you an introductory because there's a lot of information to disseminate, because there's just kind of a lot happening in this. But so far, definitely so good. And I can't wait to learn more and read more about this magic and the projects they're going to be working on. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. For lunch, where's Millie? There she is, never too far away. I made tuna salad. Should be delish. I made homemade cinnamon rolls to bring to a girls' night tonight. But of course, I had to make myself a little sampler platter before I go. Completed cinnamon rolls, ready to be taken. Be settled amongst the other food that's being brought. Hello everyone, good morning. I'm happy to report that the cinnamon rolls were a hit. And there's only like 2 left, and I'm actually about to heat one up to enjoy it this morning for breakfast. I have been reading and I want to do a reading update. So I'm happy to report I am really enjoying this book. I'm finding it to read really quickly, but that doesn't imply that there's not a lot of complex things going on. So let's dive in. This is a lot of things I want to talk about. There's like a lot of ground to cover, which again really speaks to Emma Wong's like ability to do a lot of world building in her standalones. And they're long, like don't get me wrong, this book is, you know, 500 pages. But at the same time, like this could easily be a series, if you know what I mean. First and foremost, I would say the themes and the things that the author is trying to center and discuss within this narrative are pretty clear. She's definitely not trying to be vague at all, and she's actually centering a lot of these topics and issues central to the plot and story. Those are ranging from sexism, misogyny, to xenophobia and colonization and destruction of the environment, pursuit of progress at all costs. Like all of these things are very central to the story. And also this utopian city of Tehran is definitely a settler state and city, and our colonizers. And like, again, that's all very much part of this book. What's interesting about this book and what I like is that there's a lot of dialogue happening. Skonia, as our main character, is incredibly imperfect. She experiences a lot of sexism and misogyny in her day-to-day life, especially as a mage. But Skonia is an interesting character because she's not really interested in actually being like this force for like change. Her desires are all rooted in her pursuit of glory. So she's obviously frustrated
as you would expect when she runs into barriers from other people. But her desire to dismantle these things are kind of rooted in her own desire for success, not necessarily to like make a path for others behind her. And this also really speaks to her blindness to other things sort of surrounding her, her sort of general mistreatment of her family, lack of unpacking of narratives that she's taught by her own government and her own society. She's only really focused on how society impacts her in a bad way and not really how society also impacts others in perhaps worse ways or similar ways. Kind of shows a sort of intersectionality conversation that Emma Wong is like trying to have within this book, and I think is interesting. Obviously, as she begins to work side her new assistant, her perspectives are being like directly confronted and challenged in ways that she's never really had before. And as an academic, she enjoys to kind of have these sort of deeper conversations to try to sort of confront her ignorance, which I think is an interesting approach. I will say how successful these things will be ultimately, I think, depends on how the author is going to end the book, because there's obviously an interesting balance that she's trying to have here. All that to say is I do think Skonia is an interesting character, though incredibly flawed, but I also think it makes sense. She's a product of her environment, and if she was this perfect person, I think that would make it a lot less realistic and a lot less interesting. But we'll see, because I'm not, I'm maybe a little over a third of the way through. It'll be interesting to see how her character continues to transform through this book. I also hope is more than just, obviously he's learning magic from Skonia, so there is a bit of an exchange of knowledge, but it'd be nice to have Quen be a character that's not just like there to, in a way, educate and help Skonia like throughout the story, but we'll just sort of see how that continues to progress. Outside of the very clear commentary that the author is doing, there's also some other stuff happening in the plot that's very interesting, but again, everything is very much intertwined. First off, the academic part of this book is like very central and something that I'm personally really enjoying. Skonia is brilliant, so seeing her sort of work through problems and navigate concepts is cool, and I also really love how the author is communicating to us how this magic system works. It's just like a really fun environment to be in, and it's just I like being around clever people, so seeing them work together and like trying to tackle various problems is interesting. Obviously, they're working on a project to expand the border of this city. So it's like a very complex problem they're trying to solve, and she's basically taking on her male colleagues who are all working together to try to come up with like the best solution. There is an element of like competition as well, but again, it's not necessarily for the sake of like the betterment of the city. Like her interest is like glory, which again, I appreciate that she's not this like bastion of like morality. Like she's a very flawed person. All that to say is there's a lot of like interesting academic elements of this book. Not only we're following characters like trying to break through magical questions, but there's just a lot of like historical, philosophical conversations happening between characters too, which I appreciate. The more I learn about this world, I do feel like it's sort of coloring everything in even further, and there's just a lot of like levels of things sort of happening within it. I would say that it still feels a little direct in its approach, but I think that's more of a preference thing in terms of a writing style. But I am finding this book to be interesting, and I'm looking forward to reading and exploring more. And I'm very curious to see like how this book is going to escalate and ultimately where it's going to go. I feel like Emma Wong likes to do this thing where her characters are sort of confronted with a truth and a reality that they just never really considered before. This was true in the Sword of Kaigen. And her books are also, generally speaking, heartbreaking when these truths are sort of exposed. And I feel like that's definitely happening with Skonia. Her world is sort of like being altered and changed as she's, being confronted with new information that she either was blind to because she was never told, or like conveniently let herself be blind to, or maybe a combination of those things. So let's see how this continues to unfold, Hi, I got dressed and I wanted to show you all my outfit. I got this dress last year and I really like it. It's just this little denim number, and I layered like this little strawberry shirt with it. So cute. It's a couple years old. I'll try to link something similar if you're interested, but I hate summer. I hate the heat, but I do love wearing
summer dresses. So cheers to that. Midday snack needs to happen. I've made lunch already, tuna salad again, but I'm feeling snacky. We're going to watch the basketball game tonight because the Dallas Mavericks are in the finals. But I've been looking forward to eating there all week, like a cheeseburger, some French fries, maybe some buffalo wings. Honestly, it just hits different. But I love these Gouda cheese wheels too, so I'm gonna eat one for a little snack. So I'm feeling a little peckish. Need something to tie me over. I'm also almost done with my work, so I'm gonna sit down and do some reading here in a second, as I need to pick up the pace. I'm running out of time, you know what I mean? I gotta read this book. I am shook reading this book. I just like, look. I just read, I don't even know, like 100 pages. I couldn't put it down. I don't even want to walk away from this, but I literally have stuff I need to do today. The pacing of this was like, whack! It's just really well done. It's interesting because I feel like initially when I was picking up and reading the first part of this book, I think I had a criticism that aspects of the story felt on the nose, but now it almost feels very intentional, especially because I feel like the author was trying to first paint this picture of a society that is trying to do good in general, but has broken aspects of the system, or rather, this was the perspective our main character had, because I think she was trying to paint this picture that through our main character's eyes, is that this is a city that has flaws and things that are wrong about the system, but the system overall objectively was set up to do good. And so the wrongness is more about how like human folly has used the system to do wrong, but the system inherently is good. But now everything has been shattered, and it's been more about how the system was inherently flawed from the get-go. ML Wong has not been trying to hide what has clearly been like poorly kept secrets of this society, this industrial utopia. But it's more to say how the author has sort of shifted the pacing and the progress of the story, some of the dialogue, some of the internal things our characters are contemplating and being involved in, and the intensity of this curtain being pulled back, the inner dialogue that we're reading from our characters, the conversations, the consequences, and then ultimately the next steps our characters are going to take. That is the part of the pacing and the plotting that's just like has me on the edge of my seat. The discovery I felt like I anticipated and was kind of felt like it was like pretty clear that's where our author was going with this book, but it's those next steps I have no clarity on in terms of like what we're actually going to experience within this book, which is like why I feel like I can't put it down. So I just wanted to be clear about that. But it's just interesting, and I feel like the author has been sort of leading up to this moment, but like even with that anticipation, the next part of this book has just been so good, which just shows the author's talent. Like even if she's like, yeah, hello, I know, I've been leading us there. She's just so good at writing. And I also anticipate that there's going to be like other mysteries that are going to be uncovered in a part of this larger legacy of violence and corruption and exploitation that's obviously like center stage within this book. And it's a lot and it's intense. And I have a feeling that the ending of this book is not going to be an easy read or ride, especially knowing this author's other books and stories have utterly destroyed me, which also just kind of makes me like uneasy, but also unable to put this book down, because I can honestly say, like, while I maybe was anticipating this plot action, it happened in a place that I wasn't anticipating. And so the second half of this book, or rather the last third of this book, I really have no idea where it's going, and I'm a little nervous to consume it. So anyway, it's good stuff. You already know what's in this bag. What's in this bag is the delectable sandwich. Hello, it's me. I have finished all my work. I picked up a latte. We're gonna sit down. We're going to read. We're gonna see how far we can get. I feel like I'm gonna read a lot. And then I shall do an update.
Reading update time, because your girl has been reading, and boy, have I been reading. I've been reading this book so quickly. It's so hard to put down, very intense, and also just like a lot to absorb, a lot to think about. It's definitely sparking. It's definitely saying and doing a lot within the narrative. In particular, Skonia is our main character, who I've talked about a lot, but she is our main character. The journey that we're sort of going on with her is very interesting, kind of following this arc of her character from ignorance and naivety to denial to complacency to discovery to frustration to rage. Has been an interesting thing to follow, and there's also been a lot of conversations and dialogue between Skonia and Pamil and some other characters as well as like a central part of this book. The thing about this book that I feel like is doing a good job is like there is a clear and distinct message within this. And the thing is, the messaging is so central to the plot that everything is so interconnected, just as interconnected as so many of the topics and issues that she's specifically addressing. And she's not afraid to directly confront the shades and nuances of issues. And she's also not afraid of having characters be complicated and wrong, but also provide them opportunities to grow and change, but not necessarily be forgiven, which I feel like is a really integral part of this plot. Again, we're still constantly surrounded by really great secondary characters as well from a family point of view, which I've really appreciated. The magic and the world, as we continue to uncover these dark mysteries kind of wrapped up into this political and academic location that this book is centered in. As part of the world building too, it's really interesting because this is a city that kind of unites a lot of powerful things together. The religion and magic are completely intertwined, and magic and government are also completely intertwined. So these pillars of like societal control and like societal creation, like these things that influence society so much, are so enmeshed with each other. And you kind of see the results of like corruption and greed and how all of those things are sort of embedded within every facet of society and within the city, within this book. But I also feel like Emma Wong kind of has these macro things going on within the city, obviously, as terms of the larger fantasy plot, but we have these sort of character level journeys that are interplaying with these macro level issues. Like all of these things exist in mass, but we are experiencing them kind of in an isolated situation, which I think works for the story at large. I think the author is doing a good job sort of navigating a book that has such a strong central and political message, which I think is really empowering to the story and plot. It'll be interesting to see how I feel about this relative to the Sword of Kaigen when I finish. I'm reading this book so quickly. Like every time I pick it up, especially past the halfway point, I've been just like devouring in 100 pages at a time. It's hard to say if anything can top the Sword of Kaigen, but nevertheless, I'm really liking this book. I'm really respecting and appreciating what the author is doing in terms of what she's exploring within this book. And I'm looking forward to finishing it, though again, as I keep saying, I am terrified, and I think rightly so. So much reading has been done today, so much. Clay and I plan to catch up on all of our trash reality TV tonight and some other shows, so we picked up a bunch of candy just to kind of make a night out of it. I've never had these Airhead Extremes, but I keep getting those candy salad videos. I mean, they're popular. They're quite good, quite good.
Round two, folks. Round two. We have finished dinner and we're now going to watch more Fallout. We are almost done with season 1. I'm really liking it.
The other thing is with dinner, we get Clay's hair, it's a little wild right now. We watched Summer House, episode 1 of the reunion, and Summer House's season has been so good and the reunion was so juicy. For any other Bravo lovers out there, I really feel like I could write a dissertation on this season.
It's the best season of Summer House there ever was.
It's so good. And there's been some good seasons of Summer House, but this was just like every episode was like a 10 out of 10, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
Incredible. But now it's time for Fallout. Hi, I'm happy to report I finished Blood Over Bright Haven by Emma Wong. And wow, I really liked this book, and the ending was just as intense as I was anticipating. I feel like how the entire story culminated made a lot of sense, and honestly, I'm not quite sure how she could have ended it otherwise. And as brutal this ending was, I'm not quite sure how else she could have done it. So for that in itself, I just really respect like the entire arc that this author put together. Something that I really appreciated in this book too
is the relationship between Skonia and Thamil. I feel like we often get fantasy books that center two people that come from two different worlds, especially in fantasy landscapes. And there's often romance between the two. And what I really appreciated about this book is that Skonia and Thamil did really like each other, but the world and the circumstances of their life made aspects of their relationship not necessarily impossible, but it just wasn't so romanticized that you often find within books like this. Oftentimes heroines who exist within a world and, you know, so much of their life is sort of crashing down around them. They're sort of the exception in a lot of things. And the thing with Skonia is, like, she did and accomplished a lot of remarkable things within this book, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she's so different, not like other girls, but like not like other people within the reality and the context of this book. And I felt like that approach for the relationship was really interesting because there was a lot of love and empathy and care between these two characters, but at the same time the author always continually recognized how they were also from different worlds, and while there was definitely bridges that were made between them, aspects of what was going on around them was like also inevitable, but they also could be a picture for a possible future down the line, which in itself I think is really beautiful. And like, I don't know, I just found the aspects of the relationships that were present in this book to be really interesting, and I feel like the characters within the story were constantly having very complex and nuanced conversation while also being surrounded by a very intense fantasy plotline. And for the most part, I just found the entire thing to be a very successfully done story. The author sets up one story but really balloons it and grows the story in like lots of different directions, which I appreciated quite a bit. All in all, I was impressed by this. I'm constantly always in awe with Emma Wong's ability to craft and create such intricate worlds, such intricate magic systems, and truthfully not a lot of space. Same could be said for her character building, her story, plot pacing. All of the beats of this book I honestly felt was paced really well. I wasn't necessarily wanting or needing more from any aspect of the story, which I cannot say is always the case. I just feel like how she draws out her stories are just perfect, and I just really respect and appreciate that because it's a talent. I don't know how she fits so much that she does within her standalone novels, but they always leave such an impact. And I just feel like I've been on such a long journey with all of these characters, but it's only been one book, which just boggles my mind. I'm rambling. All this to say is I really enjoyed Blood Over Bright Haven. I would really recommend this book. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye.